I saw the Atlantic Monthly magazine sitting on the kitchen counter. The front cover caught my attention. The golden age of American Jews is ending. I picked up the magazine. The cover article was written by Franklin Foer. Memories flooded in. My mind drifted back 30-plus years. It was a late fall day in 1992, I think. I was loving being a Jewish college student in New York. Every day was a new adventure. I was independent. I got to explore New York City. I was meeting really interesting people. Though Columbia was officially only about a third Jewish, it seemed like everything, everywhere, was a celebration of Jewish life and culture. Within a few days of my arrival on campus, I met my pre-orientation group. Culturally, ethnically, and economically diverse, it turned out that 7 of the 8 of us were Jewish. I met the guy selling sweatshirts on College Walk when he held up a Columbia shirt written in Hebrew letters. People everywhere walked on campus with yarmulkes on. I went home with new friends for all the Jewish holidays. I learned about Orthodox life on Long Island when I went home with one friend for Shabbat. I learned about Southern Jewish life when I went to visit another in Charleston for Passover. I was in awe of the variety of Jewish opportunities all around me. The best part was meeting up with new friends on the steps of Low Library in the middle of campus. As we sat there, I got to meet many other people who were walking by and stopped to chat. One of them was Franklin Foer. A bright, excited kid from DC, he knew lots of my new friends, and so we got to talking. "Hey, let's go explore the Upper West Side," he said. On a crisp fall day, we decided to walk down Broadway to Zabar's. Now, I'm a San Francisco girl, raised on House of Bagels, egg bagels, Shenson's lox, and Fantasia's half dips. Those of you who have been here for a while know exactly what I mean. To me, that was the epitome of Jewish culinary perfection. I didn't have a clue what else was out there in the world, what was available in New York. I had never had a knish, an egg cream, or a pickle from a barrel. So when Frankie, as he was known then, invited me to walk down Broadway 36 blocks and check out Zabar's, I thought I was going on the greatest field trip ever, and I was. We watched the fish guys thinly slice all the different kinds of smoked, pickled, brined, and cured items in the cases. We tasted all the flavors of the strudel, but best of all, we walked and talked and had a great day. When I saw the April edition of the Atlantic magazine on the kitchen counter a few months ago, I was transported right back to the fall of 1992, a wonderful time to be Jewish. I picked up the magazine and flipped to the cover article. I wanted to read what an important magazine had to say about Jewish life in America. I wanted to read what my college friend had written. But most of all, I knew that this article, whatever it said, was written by someone who shared my formative experiences as a Jewish young adult. I was so curious to know what he had to say about the end of the golden age of American Jews. In the aftermath of the October 7th horrors, we've all been reeling. The last many years have seen a continuous rise of anti-Semitism in America and revealed many uncomfortable realities about how we are or are not integrated into American society. All of the issues bubbling up around the nation finally came into the spotlight on our college campuses. We watched as many of our campuses were overtaken by protests, tents, vandalism, and even violence. Many Jewish students across the country were confronted with subtle or overt anti-Semitism as they tried to go to class. My beloved college campus, so filled with wonderful Jewish experiences for me and the others who were lucky to be there in the 90s, was rife with clashes and confrontation, nearly ripping the place apart. In the last year, we have watched in horror as, under the guise of free speech, many of our universities became the sites of ideas and behaviors antithetical to true free speech. It has been a scary time for Jews in America. We've worried about anti-Jewish sentiment from the right and the left. We've worried about Israel and the policies of its governments. We've worried about what to do if we have to leave this country. We've been afraid. For the first time in several generations, we keep asking various forms of the question, are we safe here? Many of you have shown me passports and documents we never thought we'd have to look for. We've called embassies of countries our parents and grandparents escaped from and asked how to reclaim citizenship. What does it feel like to be a Jew in America today? I thought. Maybe whatever golden age we were living in has come to an end. I picked up the Atlantic magazine again and decided to read the article, "The Golden Age of Jews is Ending." I braced myself for lots of bad news. But I expected to know much of it anecdotally. From walking around and listening to the fear of so many of us, and the lack of understanding of that fear from so many in the larger community. I just didn't like the title of the article. Soon after October 7th and the ignorant letters that were sent as a response by many organizations we all know well, I sat with several community leaders to discuss what was so hurtful about what they wrote. My biggest takeaway from those meetings with ministers, teachers, administrators was the total lack of understanding of the vulnerability we feel. As an overall well-educated community represented in all areas of business, the arts and sciences, we Jews seem very comfortable in America. We are viewed as insiders by many, yet we often wonder if we are outsiders. What does it feel like to be a Jew in America today? I opened the magazine. I was cringing looking at the title of the article. The Golden Age of American Jews is Ending. Didn't sound very optimistic. The article began with a description that fit my experience, a positive, proud feeling of being Jewish that I felt so strongly on my college campus and in the years beyond. For a couple of decades, it was kind of cool to be Jewish in America. At least in some circles, Ruth Bader Ginsburg became a cultural icon. People quoted Seinfeld everywhere. Hanukkah stamps were available in December at the post office. Chelsea Clinton was married by a rabbi. So what would the article tell me about why things weren't feeling so great these days? I continued reading with interest and a knot in my stomach. When I finished the article, I read it again. I thought about it, and then I decided I needed to talk to the author to clarify some things. Frank and I emailed and set a time to meet. It had been years. Though I kept up with his work through mutual friends, we hadn't talked in ages. I called him at the appointed time. After 2 rings, he picked up the phone with, "Jessica, how are you?" "It's been ages," I said. "We need to catch up." "Before you tell me what you've been up to," Frank continued, "can we just talk about our trip to Zabar's for a minute?" What a day that was. I smiled. For a second, the last 32 years disappeared into thin air. We caught up on life, and then he asked, "How have you been since October 7th?" That launched us into a long, long conversation about the answers to that question and about Jewish life in America, about his experiences as an observer of Jewish life and mine. We talked for 2 hours, and just before we hung up, I said, "You know this is going to be my Yom Kippur sermon, right?" Then I invited him to come speak right here on this bima. He'll be here December 12th, but I'll remind you as we get closer to that date. Our conversation sparked so many ideas, and I've continued to reflect on them. Is this really the end of the golden age of Jews in America? It's time we talked about what's really going on around us. So, what does it feel like to be Jewish in America? In the last almost 53 weeks since October 7th, I have burst into tears many, many times in public spaces. Maybe you have too. Some parents on my daughter's soccer team have texted to ask, "How are you? It must be so hard to be Jewish right now." Others have gone on with life as usual. People have stopped me to whisper their thoughts about the war and to tell me how hard it is to talk to their spouse, their friends, their coworkers. I've heard stories about friendships ended because of social media posts. A few months ago, John and I sat in the audience at a Columbia alumni event, listening to the then new president of the university, she's not there anymore, talk about New York's cultural offerings and her move to New York City, while at that exact moment, Jewish students were barricaded into the campus Hillel because there was a mob outside the door. While we waited for the president to mention what was going on campus, my phone was buzzing with updates from parents of the kids locked in the Hillel. We waited and waited for the Q&A time when we could ask about the scene on campus, but it never came. The Q&A portion of the program was canceled. In the last year, Jewish affinity groups started in many San Francisco schools for kids and parents. Jewish neighborhood WhatsApp groups popped up all over town. What does it feel like right now to be Jewish in America? We've all been thinking about this question. Recently, John and I went to a Shabbat dinner of the newly formed Jewish group at UCSF. When we walked in the door, John said, "I had no idea most of these people were Jewish." Suddenly, the faculty, students, residents at UCSF had a Jewish group to join, and many decided to publicly identify as Jewish. As American Jews, we've encountered many challenges in the last several years and the last 53 weeks in particular. Pushback against us has felt unfair, concerning, sometimes even terrifying. Nearly 80 years after the Holocaust, American Jews were starting to feel safe for the first time. We were feeling at home here. Our anxieties about not belonging were retreating into the background. Our sense of vulnerability and victimhood was finally being replaced by permission we gave ourselves to feel more joy. As an example of the shift, let's consider religious school curricula. The emphasis that had been put on the Holocaust in our children's education from the 1960s until very recently had finally been replaced by new curricula, which honored and taught a larger picture of our people's story. The Holocaust is, of course, an important part of our history, but it's not the only story of our past. 3 generations from the horrors of the Holocaust, our kids were not defining themselves in connection to anti-Semitism. The last 30 years truly were a golden age of Judaism in America. Jewish jokes and Yiddish words were shared all over. Bagels became ubiquitous on American menus, and Trader Joe's even created better-than-homemade latkes. Our ancestors would never have believed that there would be 3 Jewish justices on the Supreme Court at once, or that 3 of our recent past presidents would have Jewish grandchildren. We were thriving and visible, and we didn't feel much fear, and we were proud to be Jewish. But then, our old worries started to creep back in, and they were bolstered by white nationalism and a president who suggested that there were very fine people on both sides. We started to wonder if things could turn bad. Would quotas be reinstated at our universities? Would we have to go back to whispering the word Jewish, like in Brighton Beach Memoirs? On October 7th, when Israel was attacked, the entire Jewish people was attacked. And suddenly we remembered that our grandparents kept a suitcase packed, just in case. And we asked if it was safe to keep our mezuzahs up on our front doors, and we wondered, would people hide us if it came to that? And then suddenly we realized that it didn't feel so great to be Jewish in America anymore. And so here we are. Is it, in fact, the end of the golden age of American Jews? I've thought a lot about this question, what to say about it today on the most somber day of our year, one which invites us to think deeply about our lives. For 40 years, our ancestors wandered in the desert. Their journey was aspirational, based on a vision, a dream that was illustrated for them and delivered by leaders who helped them imagine what the vision would eventually look like. But in the Torah, there is much discussion about things which don't exist yet. Rules about gleaning in fields of grain, of harvesting vineyards, of building walls around the roof of your house. The Israelites had none of these things. They had movable tents and were covered in dust. They weren't planting vineyards, much less leaving the corners of the fields for the less fortunate people in town. There were no grapes, no fields, and no towns. But the vision of what might lie ahead of the society that they would build when they arrived in the promised land, that inspired and kept our ancestors going for 40 years. Their determination to get to the place that they dreamed of motivated them to keep going. We're no strangers to aspirational thinking. In fact, it might be one of our greatest strengths. So now is a good time to use it as American Jews. The story of our people in America is no less aspirational than that of the Israelites. We have believed in a vision of an America that protects its inhabitants, guaranteeing the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness for all. That vision guides us forward. As American Jews, we must participate in the work that brings that vision closer to reality for us and for all people in this country. Aspirational visions have inspired our people for several thousand years. We must continue to build the society we want to live in. So where do we go from here? Is this truly the end of the golden age for American Jews? And what does that even mean? Here's what I want to tell you. First, as sad and afraid as we've often felt in the last year, fear is not the answer. Fear occludes all pathways and blinds us to what is real. Fear crushes all else, including our own souls. Tempting as it has been, we cannot succumb to it. I propose that we push our fear aside and make space for vigilance instead. Vigilance is about action, it's about watchfulness and awareness. It's about being present. Vigilance gives us agency and helps us consider what is actually happening around us. It forces us to focus and to evaluate real dangers, not perceived ones. What does it feel like to be Jewish in America? It feels like being on all the time, reading the news and listening as people talk to us. It feels like paying attention. It feels intense and exhausting sometimes, but it also feels empowering because we are aware and in conversation with others. Our job as vigilant observers is to interpret evidence without being shut down by fear, to be thoughtful, to be critical thinkers. We are investigators of the world around us. Second, people are watching what we do, how we respond. At this moment, hard as it may be to believe, there is power in what we model. This is a moment to lean into our moral positions with self-confidence, to be proud of Israel, and with love to be critical of some of its policies. In this time, we cannot shy away from clearly representing what we believe and letting the world know that we are proud Jews, defenders of Jewish existence, and self-confident enough to be honest. This is the time to stand tall and to be clear about what we believe. There is so much to love about being Jewish, about Israel, about Jewish culture, texts, values, traditions. We should never hide from identifying with all of that. And we should never shrink from acknowledging all of our imperfections. What does it mean to be Jewish in America? It means that we proudly represent ourselves as American Jews or Jewish Americans, citizens who are loyal and committed to both our nation and our ethnicity. Be counted. Lean into our community, to Jewish practice, to Jewish identity. Third, we must apply the same rules when we think about our American identities. Being Jews in America today means helping to articulate a vision of America that upholds the best values of our history and the best vision of our future. We are proud Americans. We are defined by our democratic values and our unique American culture, and we stand firmly in this camp too, as models of what it means to be Americans. We must hold our country to the highest standards of democracy, and we must help our society to achieve them. We must work to make our nation as strong and safe a place as we can for all people. The civil liberties that we value so deeply, that we as a community rely on so strongly, must be defended not only for our own good, but for the good of all who live here. Being Jewish in America means ensuring that everyone will be protected by the very same civil rights that have made this country an excellent home for Jews. As we protect ourselves, we protect everyone. Thinking about our role in America, I went back and reread the conclusion of the article. I didn't like it. The article ends with this paragraph. A society that holds its Jews at arm's length is likely to be more intent on hunting down scapegoats than addressing underlying defects. Although it is hardly an iron law of history, such societies are prone to decline. England entered a long, dark age after expelling its Jews in 1290. Tsarist Russia limped toward revolution after the pogroms of the 1880s. If America persists on its current course, it would be the end of the golden age, not just for the Jews, but for the country that nurtured them. Though historically accurate, I couldn't tolerate that pessimistic and depressing prediction. So when I had the author's attention, I finally came out and said it. Frank, I hated the end of your article. It makes us sound doomed to failure. Well, he said, I didn't write an article about the demise of Jews in America. I wrote an article about the end of the fantasy era, the recent golden age. The next phase of Jewish life might just be more real, he said. Like most of our history, in order to thrive, we'll have to focus and work harder. I could tolerate that prediction. It doesn't preclude our success. Rather, it requires our commitment and engagement with the challenges around us. And then I realized, tomorrow morning we'll read these words in the Torah, Natati lefanecha habracha vehaklala, hachayim vehamavet. I have set before you blessing and curse, life and death. Bacharta b'chayim laman tichye ata v'zarecha. Choose life so that you and the generations after will live. These ancient words are so perfect for this moment. What does it feel like to be a Jew in America today? Well, it feels like we have work to do. This has always been true. We Jews have to build the world as we want it to be. We must remain vigilant, addressing the challenges we encounter. We have to lean in to Jewish life to be counted. And we have to bring our deepest held values to everything we do as Jews and as Americans. Being Jewish in America today means we are profoundly aware that we are surrounded by blessing and curse, life and death. And that God's instruction to our ancestors is meant for us too. Make choices in this challenging time. Choose life so that you and the generations ahead will live. It is God's fundamental instruction to our people. Natati lefanecha habracha v'haklala hachayim v'hamavet. I have set before you blessing and curse, life and death. Bacharta b'chayim laman tichye ata v'zarecha. Choose life so that you and the generations after you will live. These ancient words guide us as we go forward with strong Jewish identity, pride, joy, and commitment to the future, to our future, and to America's. Gamar Chatima Tova, may we all be inscribed for blessing in the book of life.